What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to the Bullish on Events podcast. This is the podcast where we interview founders that are hosting in-person events in the age of AI. And today we got Damiano Raventhiran. Damiano, thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, Andrew.
Now, Damiano's done a lot of really impressive stuff in the agency space. He's launched agencies, he's sold agencies, he's worked with some of the biggest companies in the world like Nike, HBO Max, Stake.com. And he also runs a business where he helps other agency owners add $400,000 in new MRR through enterprise client deals, amongst so much other stuff that I'm probably missing. So, Damiano, before we dive in, do you just want to give us a little background on who you are, what you've done, and what you're up to these days?
Yeah, 100%. So, Damiano from Montreal, obviously. I have been an agency owner for about 12 years. I started my first agency when I was 24 years old, and I didn't know anything about running a business or running an agency. When I started, I had just moved from Montreal to Toronto to find a better job. I was in a bigger city. After I paid my rent, I had about $400 in my pocket, and had been watching YouTube videos about e-commerce and making money online. And through that process, I learned to build Shopify stores. And so I was like, hey, you know what? I need some extra cash to get some groceries this month. So let me go and just ask a bunch of stores in downtown Toronto if they needed a Shopify store. And started doing that, closed my first client that way. And over a period of 7 years, that turned into my first agency, which I grew to $8.4 million a year, 75 people with 30 offices in two countries. I sold that company and then I did it two times after that as well. So in the last 12 years, I've been able to found and build and grow and exit three agencies. Today, I run a private equity firm called Ray Ventures. We have 8 companies in our portfolio, four of them being agencies. And then I'm also an agency consultant. So I work with agency owners and executive teams at agencies to kind of help them scale.
Awesome,
Yeah.
man. I know for anyone listening right now that's like dying to hear more about the agency stuff, I'm sure you got lots of content on YouTube and stuff on
Mhm.
LinkedIn and whatnot that they can go check out because we're actually not going to be talking that much about agencies today. Because something else that I thought was interesting, and this was actually in an exchange that you had with my business partner when you guys connected on LinkedIn, is you said like while you've done all of that really impressive stuff, you've also hosted over 100 events worldwide over the
Yep.
last 5 years. Which is like that's super impressive. That's a very high volume, high volume of events, and I'm very interested to hear more about the strategy, like why you're hosting these events, what purpose they serve inside of your ecosystem. So super excited to dive into all that. And to start off, yeah, what would you say if you were to break down like the high level overview of your event strategy and the way these events like plug into your ecosystem? What would it be?
Yeah, so I mean, we do a lot of enterprise sales. I would say enterprise sales has been my superpower over the last 10 years. I've personally closed over $25 million worth of enterprise deals in that time. Um, and one of the things I've learned about enterprise is that it's very much based on relationships. And so I actually teach my clients this entire system of how to build relationships and how to do it through events as part of some of the touch points that we have there. So I'll just go through it super quick, but basically we use a method that was actually created by the CIA, and it's called the three buckets. So when a CIA agent wants to build trust and familiarity with a target, the first thing that they'll do is they'll start being super intentional about the type of conversation they're having with that target, um, and using the framework that they've been using for the last century, which is called the three buckets. And the
Mm,
three buckets relate to a part of someone's life. So there's bucket one, bucket two, bucket three, which relates to their public life, their private life, or their secret life.
mm,
So what the CIA basically figured out is that in a conversation, the conversation will usually fluctuate between these three buckets, right? You're going to talk about stuff that have to do with with your public life, and then if the person asks more of a little bit of a private question, you're going to share information that you would only share with your closest friends and family. You keep that conversation there for a certain period of time, and then the conversation will naturally go back up into bucket one. And so, because there's this flow between bucket one and bucket two in most conversations, including business conversations, we can actually track that. And so, I train my sales teams and my clients we have like smartwatches on, and basically when we're talking to an enterprise lead, we track how long we had with that person in a bucket two conversation. We
Mm.
know from our research and from the research that the CIA has done that if you spend on average about 8 hours in a bucket two conversation, the likelihood of that person doing you a favor goes up to 97%, which is
Wow.
extremely high. Now, getting 8 hours of bucket two takes time. It takes multiple touch points. It takes multiple months in some cases multiple years. But um, if you do it systematically and you create a system where you have enough face-to-face time with these leads to build the relationship, get the relationship to be a bucket two conversation, get them to see you as a friend and to trust you and all of that, and to see that what you're offering is actually valuable to them, then it'll be a lot easier to close them when the time comes. And so
Mm.
what we do with the events is we organize private dinners around really large conferences a little bit all over the world.
Mm.
And we'll invite companies that we really want to work with and leaders in those companies that we want to build these relationships with. We don't necessarily pitch them at the event to work with us on the marketing side or anything like that. We'll build those relationships over several conferences. And so we usually target industries and companies that do spend a lot of money traveling the world, going from conference to conference, exhibiting at these conferences. Some of these companies are spending millions of dollars on their booths. They're very high-end productions and stuff. So
Mm.
for them to want to attend a private dinner with peers in their space at the same level, that's usually something that they want to do when they're in town because they're looking to connect with people and they're looking for things like this. And so, um, yeah, about like I want to say like 7 years ago, we started just putting together these private dinners. It's usually like private room in a really fancy restaurant. About
Mm.
20 people come to it, but it's a very curated kind of event. And then from there, our entire goal as a sales team is to just build those relationships until we know it's time to ask for the favor and
Mm.
get that um, get that contract. And because we're working on thousands of leads at once, throughout the year, we don't, even if some of these relationships go into like a year or 2 years, which before it actually closes, it doesn't matter because there's just such a large volume. And because we do tons of events, then, we can invite the same people to different events to get more face time with them. So that's kind of like one of the event strategies that we have that has been working really well on the enterprise side.
Man, I love that. That is awesome. For these potential partners that you're inviting to these dinners, are they usually do you find that they usually need to be inside of your network already and already kind of warmed up to you to then
No,
invite them to a dinner, or do you ever invite them cold to a dinner where it's like the first interaction you're having with them?
most of the time we invite them cold. And so we have tons of different strategies. Like, for example, like a strategy that I have is if you sign up for a conference, you'll usually get access to the conference app if it's a large enough conference. So you can scrape that up and you can actually find everyone who's going to be attending. That's a really easy way for you to then enrich that information and reach out to them through email or phone or whatever other way to invite them. And in a lot of cases, we also do outreach over LinkedIn. We know the companies we want to work with, so we start with the companies, and then we break down their corporate hierarchy to figure out who's who. And then from there, we strategize around how can we get face-to-face time with these people. And events are just like a massive part of that.
Mhm. And then at these dinners, so this is a fascinating strategy. I love this because I've heard of. I mean, we've had people when we've hosted our conference like reach out to us and say, "Hey, is it all right if we host an event?"
Mhm.
Kind of like piggybacking off of this event. And it's fine, as long as it's like not during like an important part of the event. Which this sounds like it's always like probably after the main event has wrapped up. At these dinners, how much would you say 100% of the conversation and the atmosphere is around relationship building, or do you ever shift into talking about what you guys offer, talking more about business and the sale, or is it purely focused on building the relationship? Then you follow up with your sales team after the dinner to like kind of push them towards the sale.
Yeah, I would say it's a combination of the two, but depending on how much time in a level two conversation we have with someone,
Mm.
that will naturally like fluctuate. It usually naturally goes into work. It might even start there in some cases, but our goal is to really be building a relationship with these people. If you do everything right after the dinner is done, we usually run our dinners from like 6:30 to like 10. But after it's done, if you did everything right, everybody goes out and we all go out and drink at a bar or something like that, which
Nice.
which gives you even more opportunities to build that relationship. And so we want to make sure that everybody at the dinner is talking to each other, that there is the dinner itself is really just connecting and networking with people, peers in your space. We have been really successful at these dinners. So now we actually have a lot of companies that want to sponsor. And so depending on who's in the room, we'll have a sponsor or two that kind of like paid for the dinner or
Mhm.
is there for certain things. And so we'll usually give the sponsor a little 10-minute spot just to be able to share what they do. But that's as far as it goes. Like we really want the dinners to be a place where they can come and they can connect with each other and build these relationships, and just so that if we do follow up afterwards, we're not ignored and they do want to keep the conversation going because now it's more personal than just a cold outreach.
Totally. Yeah. No, that makes a ton of sense. And do you for these dinners, do you usually have is there a theme going into it, or is it mainly like the frame of the dinner is like, hey, come and connect with other peers, other people in your industry, more of like a networking opportunity?
We've done both of those. So it could be either or. We'll usually frame it as a VIP dinner for that specific industry. So if it's e-com merchants, then we'll frame it as like this is a VIP dinner for e-commerce merchants.
Hmm.
Um, and then depending on whether there's a sponsor or not, if there is a sponsor, then we'll have like a topic around that. So if the sponsor is like a retention company, for example, an email marketing company, then we'll even do like a little 10-minute presentation on why retention and email marketing is important. We'll give that if there's a sponsor. If there's no sponsor, then in those cases, then we're just like it's just a VIP dinner
Hmm.
for people in your space to connect.
Gotcha. That makes a lot of sense. And then going back to the bucket one, bucket two strategy, I think that's
Mhm.
a really cool strategy. Have you seen the amount of time it takes to build a relationship with somebody? Is that process accelerated in person versus virtual? Like if we were to have bucket two conversations over Zoom right now, or if we were to have bucket two conversations in person at a bar, have you seen the process, the amount of bucket two conversation needed? Is it accelerated when you're in person versus virtual, or is it
Yeah.
like inconclusive there?
No, it's definitely accelerated when it's in person. What we notice is that the theory says that you have to get to 8 hours before you have that high success rate on your favor.
Hmm.
But we've noticed that when you do it in person, you can literally cut that time in half in some cases. Like
Hmm.
usually by hour four, hour five, like the topic of working together really becomes clear at this point. Um, and then the more you build that relationship, the more you become part of their ecosystem, the more opportunities and doors kind of open up to you. So, there's the opportunity of working with that lead directly, but then there's everything that their network can give you as well.
Yeah.
And we start sharing value and stuff like that. And like everyone is different. Like sometimes it'll happen right away. Sometimes we don't even have to go all the way to hour four or hour five.
Mhm.
Um, but the theory says that if you want that 97% like success rate, it's usually around hour eight where you're like, okay, I've spent enough time with this person that they know me and we're like super close. The CIA has literally used this to get people to betray their countries. Like it
It's pretty
works.
proven. Yeah, it's proven.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's awesome. And then how do you navigate transitioning from the relationship talk to the business talk and like the possibility of working together? Because I know we've heard a lot of people have a hard time shifting from like value and relationship building to
Yeah.
selling. People feel like selling is sleazy. Like sometimes they don't
Mhm.
want to sell a friend because it's like, oh, I don't want to like, muddy the waters of our friendship. So how do you guys navigate that like transition from, okay, we're building a relationship, we're having these level two or bucket two conversations. Now it's time to start talking about business and try to talk about working together.
Yeah, I mean, so like at that point, I'm usually pretty upfront about it. That's just my strategy. So I'll usually go to them and I'll be like, hey, like we've been talking for a while, and I really like your brand, and I think I have something pretty cool to show you. Like, would you be open to me showing you that? And then it all comes with preparation, right? Like at this point, you should know why your offer fits in their ecosystem and within
Mhm.
their company. So when you go to them, you're a lot more prepared, right? You're like exactly like let's say you're like I sell large scale marketing campaigns for brand awareness and stuff. And so usually by the time I talk to them, like I know how much they're spending on billboards and I know like how important PR is to them and things like that, right? So I've been able to gather all this information throughout the conversations. Um, and so by now I'm like, hey, based on the conversations we've had, I really think that I have something really cool to show you. So would you be open to taking a call so I can show you that?
Mhm.
And then we take it from
Gotcha.
there, right? We do the pitch presentation, just like a normal sales call, and then we just keep that alive and keep following up until it closes.
Yeah, no, it's awesome. I feel like at least with our business too, I find that we work in an industry where luckily we get to meet a lot of our ideal clients at the events that we host, and the
Yeah.
people that we meet in person at these events that we host, and then we have a conversation after about how we can work together. It's much smoother than if we're talking to somebody for the first time and trying to you try to like warm up to them, but also explore the opportunity of working together. But when you have spent time in person with somebody, then you jump on a discovery call or a sales call, a call focused on business. I feel like you gotta skip the rapport building and be like, you know what, we have a relationship already. Let's like jump right into it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that makes a ton of sense. Now, going back to the sponsorship thing. So one thing that that's a large part of our philosophy with our events is we don't like to have sponsors be transactional at our events. Nobody likes to attend an event where there's a sponsor there. Like you experience it at conference all the time, is where you like walk into the event and there's like five booths set up and they're all trying to like lure you over to the booth and like sell you their
Mhm.
product. We aren't huge fans of that at our events, and it doesn't sound like that really fits into the ethos of your dinners. How
Mhm.
do you how do you manage that with sponsors? How do you bring in sponsors that will add value to the room but don't make it too salesy, too transactional, so that you don't like deteriorate the experience for the attendees?
Yeah, I mean, we tell them our philosophy and kind of like how we work. At these private dinners, we do control where people sit, right? So
Mhm.
there's usually like place cards and people will sit where we tell them to sit. And their seating is something that we've thought through really well. So if
Mhm.
we have like let's say 20 e-commerce merchants and let's say Shopify is my sponsor for that event, just an example. And the Shopify Plus person is like, hey, you know what? Like out of your list of 20, these four here are super interesting to me, and I want to build a relationship with these four. We kind of tell them that like the dinner itself is not where you're going to close them, but it's where
Mhm.
you're going to build that relationship for you to keep having that conversation. And so I'm going to put you right here, and all the people around you are the people that you want to talk to. And if you're interested in more, then just bring more of your team members, and we'll do it that way. Um, because you're mostly talking to the person across from you and the people next to you, right? And so those are the hottest places to be able to build those relationships at the dinner. Um, and then after people eat, usually like if it starts at 6:30, by like 7:38, like everyone has finished eating. But the
Mhm.
dinner ends at 10, right? So after that, there's a lot of like mingling between people. People are like getting up and walking through the room and talking to each person, and there's a lot of networking that kind of happens that way. So that by the time the dessert comes around, that's usually where I'll let the sponsor company come up and talk for 10 minutes while
Mhm.
people are eating dessert. They've already eaten, they've already had great conversations, and now they're like, hey, by the way, thank you so much for this sponsor because they made this possible. It's not every day you get invited to a dinner at a fancy restaurant for free with a bunch of your peers, and they made this possible, so just wanted to thank them. And
Mhm.
they give a little 10-minute speech, and that's it.
That makes
I just leave it
sense.
at that.
Yeah, so it honestly sounds like you just do a really good job of framing the experience for the sponsor,
Yeah.
which I think most events set sponsors up for failure. Like they're like, "Hey, here's your booth spot.
Hmm.
Go." It's like eat what you kill type situation.
Yeah.
But if you frame them properly, and even like you just tell them the success that you've had from your dinners, where it's like purely relationship focused, I'm sure they're like super stoked just to be in the room with very high quality individuals. So that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, and then one of the things, like I've got tons of sponsors so far. So there are some sponsors that literally every time I'll ask them to sponsor a dinner, they'll say yes. And so, I wouldn't say that all of those dinners ended up becoming super valuable to them, but because like I do so many of them, then like they always end up closing like a few deals out of like a few of them there. Um, and so, they kind of learn over time, kind of like how they should approach these dinners and how to build those relationships, and that's really what makes the difference. Uh,
Yeah, very cool. Now, before we transition, I want to hear from your perspective. If someone's listening to this and they're like, "This is a great idea," it sounds like a really effective way to get into hosting in-person gatherings as well.
mhm.
Sometimes when we talk to a lot of people that want to get started hosting events, and sometimes like a 2 or 3 day workshop for 30 to 50 people sounds pretty intimidating. And it sounds like a dinner is still a very effective way to gather people in person, and it might be a little bit easier for a first timer to pull off. if someone's approaching this for the first time, like they have an event they want to position their dinner around, but they don't have any leads at the moment, how would you recommend somebody puts together a dinner like this for the first time?
Yeah, I mean, definitely be intentional about every piece of it. Like every like the preparation, what happens during the dinner, what happens after the dinner, and really like map that out as a funnel. So I'll usually start by creating a list of companies that I'm really interested in, either attending a conference or that are already in that city. I'll go through LinkedIn, I'll look at their corporate hierarchy, I'll see who the ideal people that I want at that dinner are. The attendance rate from invite to actual attendance, it's about 50%. So if you want 20 people in that room, you should invite about 40 of them,
Mhm,
and 40 companies. If there's more than 20 that show up, then great, right? Just add more chairs. But
mhm,
yeah, like I'll usually get like start with 40 and then I'll start like messaging and emailing all of these people, just inviting them out for dinner on this day. It's doesn't cost them anything. I would try to get at least six, six or seven like confirmed people to come to the dinner before going to approach a sponsor.
mhm,
There's tons of sponsor companies that would sponsor that. So like that, when I go to the sponsor, I'm like, hey, listen, I already have these brands that said that they want to come. I'm inviting these here. I'm expecting at least like 20 of them to be in the room. If there's anyone in your pipeline in this city that you find interesting that you want to invite, by all means, just let me know. We'll invite them as well.
mhm.
And hey, listen, it'll be $5,000 and you're acquiring 20 enterprise brands for $5,000. So it's worth it, right? Um, and so that's usually how I did it. I mean, I've sold these dinners to sponsors for like upwards of like 35K for the
Mhm.
sponsorship, depending on who's in the room, right? And it's like a 4 hour dinner. So it's quite easy to plan. I also want to make sure that like, if you're doing this for the first time, don't choose a rinky dinky place, right? Like you want to give people like a really nice experience. I usually try to get a really fancy restaurant. They usually have private rooms for dinners like this. So I try to find a fancy restaurant with a private room where it's going to be a high-end experience because that's what they're going to remember, right? If you bring them to a pizza place, they're not. That's the reality.
Yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense. You don't want people to feel like you cheaped out on them for the
Yeah.
experience. That makes a lot of sense. Very cool. Yeah, that's a really clear way to kind of get started on your own. Do you ever charge for these, or are they usually free for the attendee and then the sponsor is like the main revenue driver for at least covering the
Yeah.
expense of the event?
Yeah, for us, it's a lead generation activity, right? So we
Yeah.
give it for free for our leads. We even tell
Mhm.
them that they can bring another person. So each company can bring like two people, because we find it easier for them to want to do that. And then if ever they can't come, they can just give the tickets to two other team members, and then we can turn those people into the decision influencers instead of the decision makers. So we have like all sorts of like strategies like that.
Mhm. That's awesome, man. No, that's really cool. Thank you for walking us through that. I kind of want to transition now into more of a higher level conversation, you could say.
Mhm.
Like I mentioned, the purpose of this podcast is I'm just very interested in founders that are hosting in person events in a world that's very digital. It seems like a lot of people are scrambling to make it more digital. AI is becoming very integrated into our lives and businesses. I want to hear from your perspective. What role do you think in-person events and in-person gatherings are going to play in a future that is very digital, it's all basically ran on AI? What role do you see in-person events playing in that future?
Well, I think it's going to become more and more important, right? Like in a time where you can literally just make your income and stay home and just work online. Getting out. I think a lot of people are going to be looking for it way more. Getting out there and actually meeting people and networking. In my experience, also, it's the entrepreneurs that understand the power of meeting people in person and networking are usually the ones that are able to accelerate their growth. Because just by being around the right people, you're able to open a lot of different doors and get a lot of opportunities that you just wouldn't be able to get to usually. And there's only so much that you could do online. For me, it's so important that like I have a KPI every month on the number of events that I need to attend. When I attend those events, I'll usually have a KPI around how many connections I need to make that are relevant for my business before I leave. When I get home that day from the event, I write it all down on a spreadsheet with with the conversation and the potential. Then I go to bed. The next day I wake up, I look at it with fresh eyes. There's even more insights that come from those conversations that I've had. And that turns into just more opportunities for everybody involved, right? So
Mhm.
I teach that to my clients today, and I definitely think that um, because it doesn't come natural to a lot of people, but if you just learn how to host events and how to even go out there and attend other people's events and connect with people and build your network, the the growth effect in some cases could be over 10x, if not more.
Mm. That's awesome. No, we completely agree. Like one of our core philosophies here is like you could say actually like bets or predictions is as the world becomes more, you could argue disconnected because a lot of stuff's being outsourced by AI. I even saw I was watching one of your earlier podcasts where you were talking to the host of that one about like AI clones and AI personas online and people making AI
Mhm.
profiles. Like there are lots of profiles these days where you can't really tell if the person is real or AI. And I do think a lot of the talking head creators are going to start replacing themselves with their AI clone. And it's going to be very interesting to see how that works. Like I think right now that I won't enjoy a world where I don't know if somebody's like talking in a video online and I don't know if it's a real person or not. But the way that we see everything unfolding, we think that that world is going to keep functioning, but it's just going to cause people to seek out more in-person experiences. And the founders like yourself that are hosting these in-person events, like already right now, you're going to be the positioning is going to be so strong in a world like that where people are going to know you're real. They're going to trust you. They're going to know you're a real person because you host these, 10 to 15 events per year for real people. It's like it's gonna be like almost like a different type of currency, having that kind of trust by doing in-person stuff. So it's cool to see that we come from different industries, but we both align on that vision.
Yeah, absolutely. And I sell in a lot of different industries, and I've seen across the board that if you start organizing your events, you become a leader in that industry almost instantly.
Mhm.
Just because you're the organizer of these events and you're bringing people together, and usually there aren't a lot of people doing that. So whether it's in e-commerce or online gambling or entertainment or whatever other types of companies I've worked with, every single time I've done one of these dinners, it's been pretty cool because people talk about them. And by the way, like I do the dinners, but I also do other formats of events. Like I've done after parties for conferences where I've had like 600 decision makers attend, and things like that, and like 200, $300,000 worth of sponsorship. So it's there's you start with the dinners because those are the easiest ones to do, but then you could kind of like move your way up to do like larger things later on as well.
Totally. Yeah, we'll have to do a part two of this episode and dive into some of your other event models you've done.
For sure.
Very cool. Well, Damiano, thank you so much for joining, man. Where should people go if they want to, dive deeper into your stuff, connect with you, maybe check out some of your products? Where's a good place for people to go visit?
Yeah, I mean, I'm on all the social media platforms. You can find me on Instagram at Damiano R. I post on LinkedIn every single day, so just Damiano Ravintaran on LinkedIn. But look for Damiano R and you'll find me. And then my YouTube channel, The Agency Business, where I teach agency owners how to scale their businesses.
Awesome. I'll be sure to link all that stuff down in the description. So if you guys want to hear more from Damiano, drop down to the description, click on one of the links, give him a follow. But dude, thank you so much. This has been a fascinating conversation. And like I said, I think it'd be fun to do a few more of these and hear about the other events you've done. So we'll have to get something scheduled.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for having me on, dear. Really